Your Excellencies, dear delegates, may I invite you to take your seats as we are about to begin our third plenary session on the geopolitics of energy, technology, trade and power. I hope you all enjoyed a good lunch and were able to continue the conversations that will no doubt have been inspired by the morning sessions of the 21st IISS Manama dialogue. Energy, as we have already discussed this morning, remains central to global political and geoeconomic dynamics. It is, of course, also a major factor here in the Middle East, in the region. We have already touched upon the rise of the United States as an energy exporter, changing dynamics among OPEC Plus members. We have begun to discuss new ambitions centered on gas and renewable energy and new patterns of global trade that are shaping the thinking across the globe. So this session will look at ambitions and strategies of a number of countries and international organizations as well, and the place of technology and trade within the broader theme of statecraft. A brief reminder that all plenary sessions are on the record. If you would like to ask a question, make an intervention, remember that it involves a short two-step process on your part. Insert your delegate badge into your microphone unit and press the speaker button, and then you will be in the queue of those seeking the floor, and I will get to as many of you as I can. So let us now turn to our wonderful panel, and they will speak in the order that is listed in the program. We have Jan Lipavský, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. We have Ruben Brekelmans, the Minister of Defense of the Netherlands. And we have the Honorable James Danley, the Deputy Secretary of Energy of the United States. And we have Osama Mobarez, the Secretary General of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. And Minister Lipavský, may I invite you to take the floor. It's good to see you after we've seen each other in Prague a few weeks ago. Welcome to the Manama Dialogue.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for a warm welcome. It's a great pleasure to be with you today in Manama. I would like to thank Bahrain for warm hospitality, to Minister Zayavi, and I have to begin with a simple statement that this region, with its vast resources, has shaped global energy dynamics for decades. It is a particularly fitting place, therefore, to reflect on our topic in the evolving geopolitics of energy. And allow me to dedicate this speech to few remarks on lessons learned from a central European perspective. For many years, mainstream thinking on the continent in Europe was that we treated energy as a mere market commodity. Now we know that this view no longer holds. Since 2022, Europe has undergone a profound awakening to the nexus between energy and security. Yielding to its neo-imperialistic impulses, the Russian Empire revealed its true nature. It weaponized nearly everything in an increasingly open hybrid war against Europe. Energy was among its first instruments of choice, exploiting our deep dependence on Russian energy supplies. Political optimism, strategic short-sightedness, economic interest and persistent Russian lobbying reinforced by energy infrastructure connections placed Europe in a position of vulnerability. We became energy hostages. Russia turned energy pipelines into chains. But every form of dependency can be overcome, provided it is recognized as such. Of course, it requires resolve and sacrifice. On the day of Russia's invasion in February 22, my government began work on cutting us free from Russian energy imports. In oil, we broke our reliance on the Druzhba pipeline. We financed the reinforcement of the Transalpine pipeline. In short, it's known as TAL. It goes from Italy to Austria to Germany and then connects to Czechia. It now delivers up to 8 million tons of crude oil annually to Czechia from the Italian port of Terste, and since TAL completion earlier this year, we have not imported a single drop of Russian oil. We applied the same approach to natural gas. At the beginning of 2023, we ended our 98% dependence on Russian deliveries. We joined the investors in the first post-invasion LNG regasification terminal in Eemshaven, in Netherlands. It has since transferred approximately 16 billion cubic meters of LNG into European gas network. We also now have similar deals with German LNG ports. And 1/3 of this amount was US LNG for Czechia. So today our reliance on Russian gas is near zero. We are also diversifying nuclear fuel supplies for our Soviet-designed VVER reactors at the Temelín and Dukovany power plants. A few months ago, we received our first deliveries from American Westinghouse. In parallel, we are exploring other reliable suppliers, including France, to secure our needs. Western companies exited this business in the 90s, leaving the field to Russia under the assumption that it would remain a reliable partner. Why do I share these stories? Why do I share this example of Czechia? Because the Czech experience offers a case study in how a landlocked country can overcome a geographic constraints and transform its energy mix in response to geopolitical risks. Unfortunately, some EU member states had not yet cut themselves off from Russian oil and gas. Otherwise, they continue to weaken all of us. This is why I welcome President Trump's push to reduce fossil fuel imports from Russia into Europe. And I will be very specific. Hungary and Slovakia point to geographically as a constraint. They are basically Czech neighbors. The same geography applies. But that argument does not hold. We manage and show the way. Being landlocked doesn't mean being confined and without options. Budapest and Bratislava have credible alternatives to Russian supplies. For example, Croatia has offered Hungary oil via the Adria pipeline, while Prime Minister Orbán points to technical issues. Perhaps, but they can be resolved in the same manner and same way as we had challenges with TAL pipeline. And other shareholders were initially hesitant to escape the capacity, but we invested in upgrading the pipeline, retrofitting pumps and infrastructure. Same for Slovakia. It is connected to all its neighbors with gas flowing from Austria, Czechia, Hungary, Poland and Ukraine. So from our side, I can also confirm that Czech gas infrastructure has sufficient capacity to meet Slovakia's need. And my message to those who continue to rely on energy is clear. On Russian energy is clear. You have an alternative. Moscow is not a reliable partner. In the end, you will pay far more than you appear to save now. And beyond our immediate neighborhood, the Czech experience offers also the following lessons for the broader international community. Firstly, diversification is essential. Relying on a single supplier, especially one willing to weaponize energy, is an unacceptable risk. Secondly, strategic infrastructure matters. Investments in pipelines, terminals and interconnectors are not just economic, they are strategic assets that shape national security. And thirdly, solidarity is a strength. The EU's coordinated response to the energy crisis demonstrated the power of unity. Together we secured supplies, stabilized markets, supported vulnerable populations and pushed back against Russia. In this context, I want to highlight the recent adopted 19 EU sanctions package, which targets the energy sector, particularly the quick-fight natural gas, LNG. So, let me conclude by stressing that Moscow's weaponization of energy is not a just European problem. A destabilized world is not the Middle East interest. Therefore, a more coordinated approach among global energy players, many of whom are gathered here in Manama, is needed. We all understand the Middle East's leverage over global energy prices. So please keep in mind, the less Russian heirs from oil, the harder it becomes for Kremlin to sustain its war machine. Without security, there is no prosperity. Europe and the Middle East should build an energy partnership based on stability, investment and predictability. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Minister Lipavský, thank you very much for those remarks and for outlining the journey that the Czech Republic has been on to transform its energy mix. I think that call for partnership, I think, will be picked up, I imagine, by many to see how we can make that a reality. Minister Brekelmans, over to you.
Thank you very much. You might wonder, why is the Minister of Defense talking about energy? And the answer is very simple, because energy policy nowadays is security policy. I would even say that energy policy nowadays is defense policy. Because what we face in Europe, the biggest military threat is Russia. And Russia's war machine is fully funded by energy resources. What we also see is that the interdependence or the dependence on energy resources is used as a weapon. And it's used full-fledged as a way to put pressure on others. Same is true for the access to critical resources and to raw earth materials. It is not only an economic tool, it is a military and a security tool. I would like to mention three particular points. One is that we need to do much more work to integrate energy policy into our foreign affairs and our security policies. If you look where we stand today, the Russia threat that we face today, we ourselves in Europe, we funded this threat for years. And we always thought that if we keep trading and if we keep buying oil and gas from Russia, then it will never lead to war. And look where we are now. We even thought this after 2014, 2015, when Russia already invaded Ukraine, and when a plane with 300 citizens, among which 200 Dutch citizens, was shot down. Even after that happened, we thought that we could re-establish relations with Russia by trading and buying their oil and gas. But it all turned out to be untrue, because you cannot deal with an aggressor, or by dealing with an aggressor, you cannot prevent war. We are currently, as the Netherlands, we are not in war with Russia, but we are also not living in peace. We are living in a gray zone in which hybrid tools like energy are used as a mechanism, are used as a tool for pressure. Look, for example, at the sanctions that we have put in place, but that are also circumvented by Russia in different ways. This means that in order to have an effective security policy and effective energy policy, we need to integrate all the tools that we have. Intelligence, cyber capabilities, diplomacy, energy policy, and also defense. Because it's in our shared interest to safeguard supply chains and also to safeguard maritime routes. And I'm of course, very positive, and we should give compliments to the combined maritime forces that are here in Bahrain. We can compliment Bahrain and also the United States for that. But the only way to effectively safeguard those maritime routes is by integrating all the tools and all the measures that we have. The second point that I would like to raise is the shadow fleet. Energy is militarized, and what we have seen over the last years, in order to avoid the sanctions that we put in place, a big shadow fleet for transporting oil has emerged. And we try to support Ukraine as much as we can. We also try to put pressure on Russia to come to the negotiation table by sanctioning Russia and by putting more economic pressure on Putin. But through the shadow fleet, not only is it undermining our efforts to get to a peaceful solution, it's also undermining the international rule of law that we all count on. It's also creating a lot of risks for the environment, because the ships of the shadow fleet are outdated, are unchecked, and are simply dangerous. We should coordinate much more our international efforts together with like-minded countries. We should strengthen our monitoring, our data sharing, our enforcement, and also exchange best practices when it comes to the shadow fleet. Third topic I would like to raise is maritime security and underwater infrastructure. Because if you look at the current global trade, 80% of goods are traded through maritime routes, and 95% of international data is going through subsea cables. And we do see that those lines of communication and critical underwater infrastructure is highly vulnerable. We have seen that there are Russian ships, for example, sabotaging this undersea infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. And what we do also face is not only that particular threat, but an accumulation of threats. In this region, piracy, armed robbery is still as much of a threat as it has been in the past. But now also the threat of undersea sabotage by state actors is coming on top of it. So this also means that we should strengthen our international coordination on this, that we should share intelligence, should share best practices, and that we should also help each other with technological innovation, because also in the commercial sector and in the scientific world, a lot of useful innovation is taking place all around the world that we can both use in order to strengthen our security and protect our vital infrastructure. So to sum up, I would like to call for action in 3 ways. First, we need to strengthen our situational awareness at sea. We should strengthen our surveillance capabilities, and we should exchange much more information and more best practices. Second, we should strengthen our resilience. And it means preventing sabotage from happening in the first place. But if those efforts are still taking place, we should be able to withstand it. And if our adversaries are effective, we should be able to recover from those disruptions. And third, we should strengthen our deterrence. On the one hand, that means strengthening our military capabilities. It also means investing in technological innovation, but it also means making sure that we have the right legal frameworks in place and that we bolster our law enforcement. Only if we do those 3 things, we can make sure that all around the world, energy remains a foundation for prosperity and stability, instead of a weapon to pressure others and to disrupt. In order to realize that, we need to work on the principles of trust, transparency, and strengthen our shared resilience. Only if we do that across the world, in Europe, the Middle East, and other places, we can make sure that energy remains a source of connection and not a source for confrontation. Thank you.
Mr. Minister Brekelmans, thank you very much. Energy in a defense context. I think the 3 points you ended on there in your call for action, situational awareness, resilience and deterrence. I invite the audience to pick up on those and see what can be done across those 3 areas. And with that, I'd like to invite Deputy Secretary Danley to take the floor.
Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. I want to begin by thanking our hosts for the extraordinarily gracious and warm welcome that we've had since we've been here, and for the IISS for the continuing engagement and the importance of this forum that has been around for decades. And just from the discussions that we've had and the interactions with the other delegates and people here, it is as vital as it ever has been. So thank you. I agree with the basic premise that we've heard now a couple of times that energy security is national security. That, of course, is why it is that we're focusing on it in this forum. I will say that in that vein, it is critical for us to realize that the ultimate objective is living together harmoniously and through peace, achieving prosperity for everyone. Right? The purpose of the national security element here is to ensure that we have the kind of stability that we bring the world in this region from whatever struggles we have and friction into a time of peace and tranquility that allows us to move forward and ensure that the people of every country within the region can live prosperous, happy lives. And of course, energy is the underpinning to all prosperity. The question before us is how we as leaders in our various countries are going to be able to ensure that prosperity. And the answer, which is the centerpiece of President Trump's vision and Secretary Wright's vision, is affordable, reliable, and secure energy. That means that we recognize that energy is the underpinning of every sector of the economy, right? Energy is thought of as just one sector, but in reality it underpins absolutely everything that's done in every economy. And this is why, as you heard earlier from Secretary Burgum earlier this morning, the policy of the United States now is not one of energy transition, it is one of energy addition, right? We want to ensure that we have as much reliable, affordable, secure energy, and that comes in all manner of forms that are dispatchable and readily used so that we can power all of the requirements of modernity, modern life, industrialization, data centers. We live in a time of extraordinary change, both in the security landscape and in the energy landscape, right? We have threats to national security all of us face that are emergent, vectors that we've never seen before, evolving at a pace that's extraordinarily rapid and changing at all times. And we have a set of demands that we've never seen before, rising demand, especially for electricity, in virtually every country that has never been seen at this rate before. The way to handle that is, again, the attitude of abundance, and it's through energy abundance in as many forms and from as many quarters as we can find it that we're going to be able to meet that demand. Now, within the region, what our hope is to ensure that we have as many ties between the various countries in the region as we can to ensure that there is shared prosperity and a shared destiny, and even taking the morality tale of relying upon Russian oil and gas. The hope is that friends and allies between themselves can enter into the mutually beneficial commercial arrangements that will ensure that everybody gets to share in the abundance and that every country manages to engage in the kind of profitable mutual trade that ensures that everybody is able to have the most prosperous country that they can. I was in Baghdad this last week to attend the signing ceremony for Accelerate Energy's new LNG terminal that is going to allow for the import of a large quantity of LNG into Iraq. This, of course, is historic not only because it portends a great increase in the total amount of electric generation Iraq is going to have. I've seen varying estimates, as much as twice as many the number of hours of electric power delivered as has been before once it's up and running. But I think of it more as a typification of the very point that I'm getting at, that in times of chaos, it's very difficult to have that kind of infrastructure built, which is critical to the delivery of energy. It's also impossible to enter into the commercial arrangements necessary as the underpinnings for such deals to be made between countries and counterparties. That project is critical, and I'm hoping it's going to be the first of many that ties the entire region together so that throughout the whole of the Middle East we have as many commercial arrangements between countries that Iraq can be a partner, for example, to Syria, exporting electricity to help Syria as it goes through its reconstruction effort, as the Gulf going forward provides energy to the rest of the Middle East. These are the basic premises of the President's energy policy, which is peace and trade so that everybody can be as prosperous and happy as possible. As I mentioned, we're at this remarkable time of change, both for security and for energy. And it's not only the delivery of energy, but it's also the sources. we have an extraordinary amount of LNG that is being sold across the world. In fact, in the United States, we have doubled the total amount of permitted authorized exports, doubled it in the last year to about 13 BCF, and we're going to be doubling that number again in the coming, let's say, 4, 5, 6 years as new LNG export terminals come online. That is geostrategically critical, and the United States wants to be the best possible partner, a reliable and solid partner to our friends and allies to ensure that they too can reap the benefits of American energy abundance. And of course, we're blessed with extraordinarily abundant energy in the United States, and we want to make it available to the entire world, including to ourselves, of course, and engage in as much of the mutually beneficial trade that's the centerpiece of the President's policies as possible. This LNG is one facet of it. Another one is nuclear. I think that it's very unlikely that we are going to be able over the long term to meet the kind of demand we're seeing, especially from reindustrialization, manufacturing, and data centers as we've been seeing without a rapid and broad deployment of nuclear power. And the United States has engaged in extremely, I would say, thoughtful but also aggressive development of nuclear power capacity or capability in the United States. We have a pilot program that the Department of Energy is leading in which a dozen-odd different SMR designs are being put forward. They're going to be prototyped under the auspices of the Department of Energy, and then hopefully the plan anyway, a very aggressive timeline, is to bring them to criticality by July 4th of next calendar year. That is less than a year and a half from the inauguration of the President, a breathtaking pace of development, but we're on track for it. And when we manage to get them approved and operational, they're going to end up having a transformative effect, because small modular reactors, not the large gigawatt scale ones, but the small ones are strategically placeable at various points on the bulk power system to not just deliver real power, which of course is critical, but also relieve congestion and transmission constraints, basically yielding a much larger quantity of capacity over the transmission system that exists than previously existed, because the ancillary services provided by the generators will support the bulk power system. These are just a couple of examples of how America, and of course I should say, our hope of course is that you all buy our nuclear technology, right? I'm here in part to encourage you to do so. But it is with efforts such as those that America wants to stand ready and be the greatest partner that we can be to our friends and allies and help everybody share in the energy abundance agenda that the President has. Thank you very much.
Deputy Secretary, thank you very much for those remarks. Affordable, reliable, secure energy. I think you touched upon that attitude of abundance, I think you said, and the importance of reliable partnerships to actually spread that benefit. And I think there's a theme there also where conflict and weak international rules make that a bit harder to achieve. So I wonder how people might want to engage with that point. Osama, may I invite you, Secretary General, may I invite you to take the floor, please.
Thank you, Bastian. Thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure for me to be back to Manama Dialogue, and I would like to start by thanking IISS and the Kingdom of Bahrain for the invitation, the warm hospitality, and definitely the excellent organization. And also it's a pleasure for me to be here among these distinguished panelists talking about the topic of today's session, geopolitics of energy. And I think it could not be more important or timely as this time, and also specifically for our region, the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean. And if we can move specifically to the Eastern Mediterranean, I think the least we can say is that the East Mediterranean is geopolitically sensitive region with, I think, a lot of challenges over the past 2 years, mainly the Israel-Gaza war with its different surrounding conflicts. And what's happening is definitely impacting not just the region, but actually the impact goes beyond the region, and it's not exaggerating if we say that it also impacts the whole world. Having said that, I think it's it's important also to reflect that our region is quite sensitive because not just of the war, but the different shifting influence and competition for power is also adding to the complexity and the geopolitics of our region. I think it's, in spite of what's happening and this geopolitical sensitivity, also the region has a lot of potential for energy resources. Gas already discovered, in addition to more gas potential to be discovered, also massive potential for renewables, solar and wind. This could be seen as more adding to the conflicts, as a fuel for conflicts, but I think we have an opportunity here to change this classical concept about energy, and maybe it could be a catalyst for more stability and resilience in our region. But to do so, how can we do this in spite of all these challenges? I think we need to go beyond geology and geography, and there are several elements to address, but I will try to focus on three main elements in this regard. One is that we need to identify and create the proper and favorable opportunities that can be truly win-win and create shared prosperity. The second element is that we need to also to develop policies and environment that are conducive to attract more investments, which are very important to create difference on the ground. The third element is about technology and technology sharing and creating infrastructure that can create a more integrated region that achieve energy security. And maybe I would like to take advantage of these three elements and to move to talk about the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. Because the mission of the East Mediterranean Gas Forum is quite in line with these objectives and these elements. We are supported in this mission by the unique convening power that we have at the EMGF, not just of governments, but also of the industry and regulators, to create more projects, to create interconnectivity for shared prosperity. And I believe we have some successful examples, and the recent example of this success is the recent agreement signed between Cyprus and Egypt. And they are definitely win-win. They are good for Cyprus because it will allow it to develop its gas discoveries that have been discovered for a long time. It's good for Egypt because some of this gas will satisfy the local demand, and some of the gas will be re-exported through utilization of LNG capacity in the existing infrastructure. It's good for Europe because it will provide a source of diversification of energy, and it's good definitely for the companies because it will allow them to recover their costs and also achieve return on investments. And maybe this sounds much easier or simpler than it really is, because it's not just through energy or energy connectivity we can achieve stability in our region. There is a very important element that we also need to address, which is a horizon for a political solution, which might seem quite difficult or challenging given the situation that we have been through over the past 2 years. But I believe the agreement signed in Sharm el-Sheikh last week and the Peace Summit and President Trump's 20-point peace plan give us some hope. Still, it is challenging, it is complicated, but I think the good thing is that now we have ceasefire, although fragile, but we're hopeful that with the support and actually eagerness of not just the US, but the world leaders who attended the summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, we can have something, not just stop the war, but really something that can give hope to the people of the region of having peaceful coexistence. And maybe one important thing also is that we don't have any other alternatives. Rather than trying to set the proper environment for peaceful coexistence and interconnectivities between our region and the people of the region. Thank you.
Secretary General, thank you very much for those remarks. So identifying opportunities for shared benefits, ways to attract investment, and technology sharing as a route to a more integrated view of energy security. Again, a lot to dig into. We already have a bunch of people seeking the floor, so we will now turn to questions, and I will again invite a group of people to ask their questions. I encourage others to still join the queue, and as I say it, it does happen magically. Thank you very much. We'll start with Badr Al-Saif from Kuwait.
Thank you, Bastian, Your Excellencies. Thank you for the presentation. My question is to the ministers from the Czech Republic and the Netherlands. Obviously, energy security is an important aspect of the relationship between the EU and the GCC, and we welcome the diversification that you guys are doing as we are diversifying out of the Gulf. But there has to be a full-rounded view of energy security because, as you know, there has been concerns from our side, namely from the Qatari side, and the US has joined those efforts as well in terms of the corporate sustainability rules that have been applied on the LNG contracts. And I know that there has been some discussion following the joint US-Qatari letter, and even prior to that, concerning some modifications on this issue. Where do we stand with this modification? Do you think we will see something soon? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the United States, Jonathan Bass.
Hi, I'm from Argent LNG, a development project in Louisiana, lifting 25 million tons. My question to you is, how do we continue to fund these projects when companies like Woodmac are saying that energy is going to be abundant and cheap and the banks aren't willing to lean in? And how do we make a bet in the future against that?
Thank you very much. And from Oman and the Young Leaders Group, Hailana Al-Busaidi.
Good evening, everyone. My question is for the representative from the Netherlands. Given Europe's shifting its security landscape, how does the Netherlands view the importance of strategic partnership with non-European allies, specifically in the Gulf region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From Bahrain, Hassan Al-Hassan.
Thank you very much. The first question to the European members of the panel. The EU indeed has diversified its imports of energy and notably gas away from Russia. That is indeed correct. But instead it has sourced nearly now half of its LNG imports from the United States. And so in a sense has replaced dependency on one actor by perhaps a dependency on another actor, which also happens to have territorial ambitions on Greenland, and until a tariff agreement that was concluded in July was essentially engaged in a tariff war of words against the EU bloc. So is this real diversification that is being achieved, or is it simply replacing one dependency for another? A second question to Mr. Mobarez, very quickly. We've seen amid the growing geopolitical tensions in the Mediterranean, a growing proclivity, especially on the part of Israel, to weaponize some of its resource dominance vis-à-vis its neighbors. We've seen this in water, where the Israelis have used Jordanian water dependence to pressure the Jordanians into silencing some of their criticism. There's been Israeli flirtation with delaying some of the new gas arrangements with Egypt in response to Egypt's strident criticism of Israeli policy in Gaza. How do you, as the Eastern Mediterranean, work to insulate energy connectivity and cooperation from geopolitical tensions? Thank you.
Hassan, thank you very much. And from Jordan and the Young Leaders Group, Mohammed Hawash.
Thank you. My question is for Deputy Secretary Danley. So the U.S., as you said, doubled its allocation of gas exports this year to 13 billion cubic feet. And there are plans to double it again and again. And a big component of these plans is the project to develop a pipeline in Alaska. However, there are big questions about the feasibility of this project, especially from the private sector in Japan and Korea, which is supposed to be responsible for building this pipeline. So could you comment on this feasibility aspect and how you're planning to confront it?
Thank you very much. From the United Kingdom, Julia Wu.
Thanks, Bastian. My question is for Minister Brekelmans. You've really clearly articulated how in today's energy system, digital and physical infrastructure are inseparable, from remote monitoring, subsea cables, as well as AI-enabled grids. And I think that your call to action for situational awareness, resilience, rapid recovery, etc., makes a lot of sense. But concretely, who do you think should actually pay for the resilience? What are we really investing in? Is it technology, coordination, or capacity building? And ultimately, does that responsibility sit with producers in the region or with their partners in Europe and the US?
Thank you, Julia. And from Japan, Okana Asano.
Yes, thank you so much. My question is the current response from the governments or corporates to the ongoing energy security and geopolitical shifts. So all of you mentioned, this is my question is to everyone. All of you mentioned that the energy geopolitics goes beyond the oil and the gas. In addition to that the geopolitical risks such as the Ukraine, Russia, or Middle East, the geopolitical, like the sensitivity and the critical minerals and the very complex, diverse supply chain and globally clean tech innovation and digital infrastructure such as data center, AI, and then the development of semiconductors. These all will combined with the increase in the global energy demand. The energy source and the security is a big issue now. But at the same time, these technology shifts as well as the geopolitical tensions and are reshaping the trade and the security linkages in around the world. And my question is that whether the current energy diplomacy and the investments from the governments and the private sector are enough adapting for these past the change in environment.
Thank you very much. So I'll stop here for now. I have a few more people on the list, so those who'd like to join, please do so. We'll come back for a second round, but maybe let us tackle those questions that we have so far. Let's go in that order that we started. So, Mr. Minister Lipavský, I'll start with you. There were a few questions directed at everybody, but there were also a few specifically to you. The EU's shift from Russian gas to US LNG, what does that mean? Is that a dependency that you're comfortable with? I think I might know the answer, but let's see. And then there were a few others. Why don't you start, and then we'll come down the line.
Yes. So the dependency which was created with the pipeline was very hard to break. Easier in gas, since LNG created a market for gas, something which was not there 10 years, 15 years ago in such a way we have it now. So now with the US, it's not a dependency in a sense that we could import the gas only from the US, and we are very happy to import it from US, and the US is our strategic ally. We are both members of NATO, and I think it's worth to say that we are creating a strategic partnership which builds upon the same view of national security, and the USA has never forced Czechia in a way as Soviet Union and Russia did in the past or trying to do nowadays. So we fully trust in technology sharing, we fully trust in being NATO allies, and happily we trust each other when doing energy trade. But the point was that diversification means to have a possibility to have a choice, to not be dependent on one source of delivery, so that even it's not the possibility to start using as a bargaining chip, which I think it's quite understandable. And with our connection to Telspot, we now have also option to buy from different sellers of oil. We do buy now oil from Gulf countries, from South American countries, and also we buy oil, or we are now talking about buying oil from the USA. So that's created, let's say, our energy independency. And of course, we are always very happy to when the US is provider of our energy supply. So that would be my answer to that. And if I may also touch upon the question which contained corporate sustainability due diligence directive, because that's something which I hear every time when I visit Gulf countries. And I think we have to understand that the intention of this directive I consider by myself as a good intention. But honestly, we have to look at European competitiveness. We have to look at the ways how those measures are being implemented, and I think this needs scrutiny. Definitely Czechia could be considered as a very cautious country when implementing those measures, and let's say that the further refinement of the legislation is needed to achieve reasonable conditions also for suppliers of energy. So let's say that I hear these concerns, and definitely Czech position is that we want to do more work on that, so we find a good way how to implement it or change it, so Europe will keep its own level of competitiveness, which definitely is our big struggle.
Thank you very much. Minister Brekelmans, you might want to add on both points, on the diversification point, on the corporate sustainability, on the rules. You also had a question on how the Netherlands views its partnerships with non-European allies, particularly in the Gulf, of course, and that question of paying for energy resilience, what one should invest in. Maybe we'll start there and then add anything else you'd like to touch on.
Yes, let me address it in that order. So I agree with what my colleague said about the directives. I think most of those directives start with the right intentions, but what of course we are now facing over the last couple of years is that we need to look whether we can achieve all that given the security challenges that we face. And second, also given the economic challenges that we face, because we do see that the impact of a lot of those directives are felt by companies for which the administrative burden is increasing, or for which the requirements are sometimes too challenging to reach within the time frame that is included. So I think overall you see in Europe that there is a discussion not to put the goals aside in the end, but to make it more realistic and make it more feasible both for ourselves and for our partners. And I think this is one of the directives in which this discussion is still ongoing, and it's all, of course, about the details, but it hasn't been finalized yet. But we need to remain in touch on that to make sure that it's feasible. Second, LNG from the US. I think we should never compare the United States to Russia. Of course, in our marriage with the United States, there are sometimes some discussions, but it's not like Russia, which is attacking us, which is threatening us, and the United States is our main security ally. So we need to make a very clear distinction with that. I think we as EU and as Europe, we should decrease our dependency on others in general. We have done that too easily. Same is true for China, for Russia, for others as well. So we need to invest in our own industries, in our own resources. But if I can choose to be dependent on either the US or Russia, I don't think there's any easier choice that I have to make in my life. Then third, regarding the strategic partnerships, yes, that is extremely important. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. We just had elections in the Netherlands. It's been quite an intense week. But for me, it's very important to be here, because we want to reach out to partners outside of the EU, because part of becoming more self-reliant and dependent is to make sure that we strengthen our ties with and strengthen our partnerships with other countries. Take, for example, the defense industry. One of the biggest challenges that we have is to ramp up our industrial capabilities. And we need to do this together with our partners, because there's a lot that we can learn from each other, exchange of technological innovation, resources that we can share. I think there are many untapped opportunities, and that's only for the defense industry. There are many, many more. And I think it's very important that we, given the world that we are in, that we strengthen the partnerships and the ties between like-minded countries. And fourth, who should pay for the resilience? That's a very good question. And I think the answer is multi-layered, in the sense that I said that in order to address the topic of resilience, you need to, of course, be able to prevent attacks or sabotage from happening. But if it happens, you need to be able to withstand it, and you need to be able to recover from it. So it starts with the individual. We in the Netherlands, we have now a big campaign on societal resilience and on military preparedness. And what we say to citizens in the Netherlands is that you should be prepared for example, a power outage or a data outage for 27 hours or 72 hours. And the responsibility starts with the individual. Then, of course, we need to make sure that the companies that are investing in that infrastructure or that are owning that infrastructure, that they also take their responsibility to make sure that the cybersecurity is in place and that other measures are taken that is within their responsibilities and within the things that they can do. But of course, governments also, thirdly, play a very important role in this. And we should also invest in defending that infrastructure. So we as the Netherlands, we invest in our monitoring capabilities, we invest in our Navy. We also make sure that we do not only use military assets for that, but also civilian assets from our Coast Guard. So we all need to make sure that we bolster those capabilities. And then finally, fourth, we need to also increase and strengthen our international cooperation through the EU, through NATO, to make sure that in terms of surveillance that we cover the entire areas in which there is undersea infrastructure. And to make sure that we have the right regulations in place, that we have the right response options in place, and that we also all act in the same manner, or at least to some degree that we act with a similar tactic, because it is quite strange if you look at the typical trading routes, for example. It would be quite strange that the Baltic states respond differently compared to the Netherlands or to France or to Spain. So to coordinate those efforts, I think those mechanisms, EU, NATO, other institutions, those are also very important.
Thank you very much. Deputy Secretary Danley, Jonathan's question is still out there. How do you attract investment when the expectation is that LNG will be cheap and some of the investment obviously initially isn't?
Yep.
There was that question, that specific question on some of the feasibility concerns around some pipeline projects.
Alaska, yep.
And then you might perhaps also want to say something about whether energy diplomacy in itself is energized enough to keep pace with the developments, geopolitical developments and the technological environment. Over to you.
First, though, I'd like to also talk about the question about substituting Russia.
Yes,
for
of
America,
course.
right?
Sorry, yes. I imagine you might, yeah.
I am delighted to have the Dutch reaffirm the enthusiasm for America. The question's premise was surprising, but okay, fair enough. I don't think I'm getting out over my skis to say that Russia and America are not similarly situated countries. They don't behave the same. They don't have the same objectives. And we don't even have to talk about the posture of Russia or America towards Europe. Just to remind everybody, America and the Europeans are allied, right? And they have been since World War II. But on top of that, you sign a contract with an American supplier and they don't fulfill the obligations that they have under the contract, you can go and sue them in the United States in a court in Delaware. And if you have the better of the argument, you're going to win. Right? That is one of the glories of the American commercial system, is that our courts are fair and that our contracts are actually read as they're written, and you can rely upon your counterparties. There's another thing, too. When it comes to LNG imports from the United States, even if you enter into an arrangement with the United States, there are other potential sources of cargoes. This was already alluded to, but I just want to say it again. if the terms of the offtake from an American supplier are not good enough, you can always go to a different one. There is real competition, and the entire global market can compete in something that America is not afraid of is competition. We welcome the idea of having our cargoes compete with other countries, and you go and you get the best price you can on the terms that you find most beneficial, and we will meet every competitor BCF for BCF. And then the question was how to finance, right? So I myself have committed the sin of using the word cheap for energy in the future. But if you listen to the triad of affordable, reliable, secure, the word isn't cheap, reliable, secure, it's affordable, right? The reality is, as energy becomes less expensive because of higher production, the cost goes down, and as soon as the cost goes down, more is consumed. Right, this is why when people talk, for example, about the increasing demand from artificial intelligence or data centers, well, what happens if we come up with a set of chips that are 5, 6 orders of magnitude more efficient? The answer isn't that there's going to be less demand. The answer is there's going to be more compute. And so similarly, as the prices drop, this is Econ 101, more energy is going to be consumed because the passion in the human heart for further prosperity and development is not going to be changed by the fact that we reach a certain point, oh, energy is abundant, okay, we're done now. No, there's going to be greater flourishing and more development of other kind. And then, sorry, the last one was, Alaska. Yep. So how do I or we and the government plan to build the Alaska pipeline? The government doesn't build pipelines. We're not living in the era of the New Deal, right? The role that we have when looking at Section 3 export terminals, that's Section 3 of the Natural Gas Act, not that anybody cares, but that is the statutory regime under which they're permitted. What the government does is it determines whether or not the project that's proposed is in the public interest. In the case of the Alaska LNG project, it was determined to be in the public interest, and I know that because I voted for it when I was on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The question as to whether or not it's built is something that is entirely a commercial question, and the commercial actors will determine whether or not they believe the value proposition to be there. Now, I think the Alaska LNG pipeline and export terminal have real benefits. The latency period for cargoes to get from Alaska to Asia is very short. It's a secure transportation route. The reserves in the north part of Alaska are absolutely immense, and once production begins, that is an opportunity to produce an absolutely incredible quantity of natural gas and LNG for export. But we will see. It is not the U.S. government's role to go around commanding the specific creation of infrastructure like this. It's a commercial question.
Thank you very much. We will return for a couple of questions after I invite the Secretary General to address this first round, but we will come back for a few. And if I look at the list, we probably have room for 1 or 2 more, so if people want to come in, feel free to join the queue. Secretary General, there was one particular question on how does the East Mediterranean Gas Forum insulate energy cooperation from geopolitical tensions and the weaponization of resources, and in a way, the Eastern Mediterranean is, of course, an area where some of these things come together. It's quite a complex region, as we already touched upon. But perhaps you can also say something about the investment requirement versus the expectation of cost and price, and then anything else you'd like to pick up on.
Sure, thank you. So, yes, definitely, it is complex. Sometimes you cannot just separate geopolitics from energy and from the investments. But to talk specifically about the example about Israel and Egypt and the gas deal, first, there has been a lot of news reports which are not all correct. And maybe I would start with the question, how can DMGF or the different stakeholders, how can they make sure that whatever deal or agreement is respected in spite of the geopolitics? I think the main answer would be it has to be win-win. There has to be added value for the different stakeholders. And actually, this is the case between Egypt and Israel. Yes, Egypt have some of this gas for the domestic market, some of it for re-export, but also Israel have an advantage because this is the outlet for the surplus gas that they have. Otherwise, they will not be able to produce, and actually more importantly, they will not be able to attract more investments to find more gas. And it's definitely good for the companies. And just to give an example, in spite of the war over the 2 years, the disruption of the gas flows was very minimal. Maybe it was once or twice, and it was only for just a few days. So I think this is an important proof that, yes, in spite of the turbulences, but it's still an economic and shared benefit project, still it can go ahead. For the point about the forecast and how do we see energy and how would this impact investments, so I think the first thing to say is that it's quite difficult to have a forecast of anything, especially for energy. And whatever forecast is not accurate, and who can do this accurately, I think he can make a lot of money, which is good. But specifically, I personally believe that the world will need more energy because of different things. Because of still a lot of parts of the world there are development is not enough, and also there is enough, or let's say, energy poverty in Africa and in a lot of parts of the world. And also because of AI and let's say the breakthrough in AI, it will need a lot of energy. So this means even if we have more LNG, more gas, this does not mean that it's going to be, let's say, again, cheaper is not maybe the right word, but at least we will need a lot of investment so that we can find more energy, develop more energy to cope with the growing needs of energy globally.
Thank you very much. So we'll take a final group of 5 questions, and then we'll have concluding comments from the panel. First up in this round is Alexander Wolfrast from Germany.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I have 2 questions for Deputy Secretary Danley. First, would the U.S. be taking back the spent fuel from exported SMRs? Second, President Trump has announced a return to nuclear testing, but has been so far rather coy on what precisely he has in mind. So I guess the question that raises for me is whether the DOE has any concerns about the reliability of the stockpile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from the UK, John Chipman.
Yes, my question is for Deputy Secretary Danley. In your prepared remarks, you tantalizingly referred to your recent visit in Iraq, and I wonder whether you could give us a couple of minutes on your analysis of the prospects for Iraq returning to becoming a global energy player. The geopolitics is in the title there, as it were, national geopolitics within Iraq that may frustrate its aspiration in this regard, and what energy diplomacy are you and your colleagues engaged in to bring Iraq more formidably into the market?
Thank you, John. From the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Brynja Oskar-Dottir. Sorry, Brynja.
You're doing great on learning how to pronounce my very complicated last name. I'm here in the middle. First of all, thank you all for excellent remarks this afternoon. So my question relates to a statement made this morning by U.S. Secretary of Interior on national energy security and national security in the 1.5%. So my question is directed to Dutch Minister for Defense Brekelmans, but I welcome input from the other 2 NATO allies on the stage. It's in terms of investing in the 1.5%. So, Mr. Brekelmans, you provided a very good opening to my question in terms of saying energy security equals defense. If you could please elaborate on if the Netherlands will be pushing for investments in energy, such as pipelines, to be included in the new 1.5% as agreed by leaders in your home country this summer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. From the UK, Fenella McCarthy.
Thank you, Bastian. My question is also for Minister Brekelmans. You mentioned about defence industrial partnerships. Would you be able to elaborate on which partners specifically in the region present the greatest opportunities for the Netherlands to work with? Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the UK, Tom Beckett.
Thank you. Again, Deputy Secretary Danley, before you, Senator Bergen, you spoke very clearly and compellingly about U.S. energy policy and strategy, and I think that's really good. But my question, and you also said that U.S. is not Russia, and I don't think anyone in this room would ever presume that U.S. is Russia. But do you have a comms problem? And I say that because for three things. Cracking the whip on Europe to divest from Russian oil and gas is a good thing. But the European outliers are pro-Russian and White House favorites. The sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil are great, but they're the first sanctions that this administration has applied to Russia. And they don't come into effect for another 20 days, and that's enough time for about 6 180s in Washington. And then the last piece is that, and it's instructive to me, was that the only country in the world not to have tariffs imposed on it on Liberation Day was Russia. So do you have a comms problem in guaranteeing reliable and secure supply to the rest of the world when they divest from Russia?
Thank you very much, Tom. And last one, Jonathan Bass, who probably feels we haven't quite answered his question. Jonathan.
No, well, my question is for Deputy Secretary Danley. How do we assure our customers for Gulf Coast, Gulf of America, LNG, that if we see a return of the Democrats, that they wouldn't unilaterally again shut down LNG exports in the middle of a Ukraine-Russia conflict and leave our friends, shared countries, and values on the side of the curve?
Thank you very much. So we've got 8 minutes left. What we will do is I will see whether Secretary General wants to add any concluding thoughts in reaction to this. I'll then ask Minister Lipavsky the same, and then we have Minister Brekelmans and Deputy Secretary Danley, who have a couple of direct questions to them. Osama, anything you would like to add and by way of concluding thoughts?
I think most of the questions were Thomas and the...
You'll stay out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Minister Lipavsky.
So my conclusion from this debate is that the world has profoundly moved in the last few years, and this debate proves that we are asking right questions in a difficult time. So I'm very happy to be part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So that leaves us with a few minutes for Minister Brekelmans and Deputy Secretary Danley. Minister Brekelmans, let me turn to you. So there was that question, will the Netherlands push to include energy investment, pipeline, other infrastructure in that 1.5% part of NATO's defense spending target? And you also were invited to speak a little bit more about defense industrial partnerships that the Netherlands might be interested in here in the region and perhaps also elsewhere. Minister.
Yeah. Regarding the 1.5%, I think energy infrastructure should be included in it because the definition of 1.5% is still very broad, but it's about security-related or defense-related investments. I think if you look at the energy infrastructure that we need for our military operations and for our military mobility, still some investments need to be made, and this can provide a good incentive to include that. I think the challenge is to not make the definition too wide or too broad, because if you include any type of investment in infrastructure, then you already have 1.5% for only energy infrastructure, and we also need physical infrastructure for roads and other things, but also cybersecurity. So there's a whole list of things that can be included in at 1.5%. I know that most ministers of finance want to have a very broad definition because then they already are beyond the 1.5%. I think for me as a Minister of Defense that wants to see some additional investments, it's better to have a slightly more narrow definition. But I think energy infrastructure should be included in it, but within that broad category we need to clearly define then what's included and what not. Regarding the defense partnerships, so I think if you want to work together in the defense industry and want to increase the cooperation, you need to have a basic level of trust and a basic level of joint interest. So to say it very simply, I don't see any cooperation with Iran, for example, because we have different security interests, and I don't see any cooperation there. That's one, extreme of the spectrum. And I think the first thing, of course, you look at is the countries with which we already have a close relationship in terms of military cooperation, but also in terms of trade and industrial cooperation. But I don't think that we should only look at our typical partners in the region, because many of the things that we need as a military and myself as a Minister of Defense is more dual-use technologies. And many innovations that are happening when it comes to AI or to quantum or in the semicon industry or whatever can also be applied in the defense industry. And if you look at drone technology, for example, or the newest types of drones, it's a combination of batteries, it's a combination of radar systems, sensors, and you could also, I think there are also partners here in the region with which the current military cooperation or industrial cooperation is limited, but which there are many more opportunities if you look at the latest innovations and the type of innovations that are taking place. So we as the Netherlands, but also as the EU, we are open to any partnerships with countries for which there is a basic level of trust, and I think almost everyone in this room could be a very valuable partner.
Thank you very much. Deputy Secretary, you've got 3 minutes to tap onto these.
I will try to do honor to all the questions asked. So first, the follow-up from Mr. Bass. So there is a certain degree of risk of change of policy, that's true, but let's remember what exactly it was that happened under the previous administration. It was a terrible policy, it was backward thinking, and it definitely was not in line with the President's vision of energy abundance. But what the Department of Energy did was it put a temporary stop on new export licenses to non-free trade agreement countries. So it didn't cease existing previously issued export licenses. It stopped the issuance of new ones for a period of time. I've heard this question in various forms several times while I've been in the current role that I have, and there's a widespread misunderstanding that the Biden administration ended exports for those companies that were already exporting, and that's not true. The United States still has the takings clause. There is quite a heavy burden to meet in order to arrest the commercial arrangements that have already been entered into. So I think that answers the question there. Number two, on Iraq, and I'm doing this as a subject that requires much longer treatment than I'm afraid I'm going to be able to give on this one. So do I think that Iraq can assume its proper place as a geopolitical force in energy production? Yes, I do. The fact that I was at the signing ceremony for Accelerate to be importing LNG to Iraq is crazy. It would be like finding yourself in a situation where Texas is a net importer of oil, right? It's ridiculous to believe that could be the case, but it is. And the reason for that is that Iraq lacks the infrastructure necessary to deliver the benefits of its own energy resources to the wider global market. We are now in a position in Iraq where the security situation is stable. The country has now a fairly stable governance structure. We're in fact going into election season in Iraq, and if you go to Baghdad the way I just had, you'd see campaign posters everywhere. It's a democracy that is going through the normal process of choosing candidates, and there is a definite forward-looking view of the future of the country that the government is interested in the development of that kind of infrastructure. Now it's possible. The last time I was there was 20 years ago, and let me tell you, the place has changed in 2 decades. So I do think that Iraq is on its way there. For the question about SMRs and testing, so SMR fuels, don't know every single case for every one of our licenses and reciprocal agreements is on a case-by-case basis, so it's literally impossible to answer that question. And then as far as the subject of testing goes, DOE is, and I'm assuming this is the predicate for the question, DOE is responsible for stewarding the stockpile. And the question was, are we concerned about it? Well, it is one of our primary objectives in the department. It is one of our main jobs to ensure that the systems are functional, and so we're always concerned about it. On the question about the comms problem, which was a little bit cheeky, but I get the point you're making. Let's not do one thing. Let's not confuse sanctions with tariffs, right? The tariff regime is there So as I've said now a couple times, America welcomes competition. We want to fight it out in the free market and win based on the quality of American innovation, technology, efficiency, and the like. What the President has begun, he's embarked upon a campaign to ensure that all commercial interactions are on a level playing field and that you actually do have competition. So, for example, in critical minerals, we do not want to see improper dumping activities to crush native industries as they begin. So I don't think the question about tariffs was fully opposite to the other question. I guess the larger point about the comms problem, I don't believe that the United States, look, we just had the Dutch agree that we're fantastic partners. I think that most people in the room would agree that the United States has a policy of being good allies and friends to our longstanding trading and military partners. And I don't think the comms problem would, in some, as you describe it, I don't agree there is one, would dissuade anybody in the room here from engaging in the kind of commercial enterprises that we're trying to foster at every turn.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So that brings our session to a conclusion. I'll invite you to thank our speakers, and we will immediately go on to the next session. Minimal staging break. Our next speaker is here and ready. So, but may I now invite you to thank the speakers of this panel. Thank you very much.